Welcome. My name is Dan Salerno. Welcome back to Documentary Business, our webinar's regular import where we talk about the various subject matters, hopefully of interest to all of us, regarding the documentary, nonfiction, unscripted, factual part of the industry. Our guest today is Liz Levinson from GRB Media Ranch, a fairly regular guest of ours on the webinars. Welcome, Liz.
Hi, Dan. Thanks so much for having me again.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I just want to, before we get started, to remind everybody, Peter Hamilton has been gracious enough to sort of cede the moderator's chair today. He's busy prepping for his annual trip to Australia, including a stop at AIDC. So if you're looking for Peter, try to catch him there. Peter, thank you very much as always. Well, why don't we jump in today? What we're going to do is we'll talk a little bit about the most recent two conferences on our calendar, Real Screen and NATPE. And this year it's a little bit different. We're going to have Liz maybe fill us in from on the ground, but just to refresh everybody's memories here, Brunico, the parent company of Real Screen out of Toronto, picked up the NATPE brand and conference, and they've actually blended the two now for the first time in Miami. So it's going to be really interesting to hear what Liz has to say about how those two work, how integrated they were, the attendances, the panels, the discussions, and so forth. So, Liz, do you want to maybe just jump in and tell us maybe some top line thoughts, and then we'll dig into a couple of bullets after that.
Yeah, anytime that you can get your industry friends and peers together, I think is always a great time, especially when that location is Miami. So
Not a
that
bad place
that
to
was
go in
really
January, is it?
yeah. Especially the Canadians, they were thrilled to be there. Um, I think Real Screen and NatPe together was very interesting. I've been, as you know, Dan, I've been a veteran of both of those markets for a very long time in my career. I've seen many iterations of both of them. We're living in sort of a new world, a new ecosystem of the television market, and I think the combination of the two made a lot of sense. And just to clarify, I attended NatP only, but there was a crossover day. So the way it was scheduled was that Real Screen was the first 3 days of the week, and then NatP was the second 3 days of the week, with Wednesday being a day for both markets to coexist. So it was actually really wonderful to come into the Intercontinental in Miami, run into people that I was not necessarily expecting to see because they were part of the Real Screen market. I was coming in as part of NatP. So there was sort of a lot of surprise reunions that were happening. And it was very special. And, I want to add also coming from LA, as were a lot of other industry peers, LA had been through quite a bit with the fires. I think that, there was a certain level of stress and sadness that came along with that. And I feel like there was a lot of support from everybody who I talked to. So that was really wonderful and a very fun environment to sort of kick off an exciting week. It also, increased the number of people that were there. So you walked into a very crowded lobby setup. The Intercontinental is sort of divided into two different floors with several little breakaway rooms that housed some of the conference sessions, some of the stands and meeting tables. So it was really nice to walk into just a fun buzz to see, who was doing what. Because Real Screen's focus has really been on content and development, and that piece focus had traditionally been more of a Latin American market, but also more of a tech, fast channel, digital market. I think
Right.
this combination was actually really interesting for Brunico to play around with this year.
That it is interesting. Like it's been a while since I've attended either one of the conferences directly, but there's a long track record there, and I think you're right. Real Screen tends to be very much about the ideas and the collaboration on the creative and things like that. NATPE tends to be a little bit more transactional in business. At least originally, of course, was very much about syndicated sales. And about a decade ago, the Latin American influence really started to dominate, hence the Miami location. Merging and blending the two, is kind of fascinating. You told me, I think in an earlier conversation though, that NATPE was a little bit different this year in terms of its focus, probably a little bit because you're not that far back in the rearview mirror from MIP Cancun, and then of course more recent, and almost in a sort of as I've called it, kind of a conference wars a little moment. You've got the Content Americas event occurring about a week ahead of the Real Screen / NATPE event. And I feel like that has pushed NATPE to kind of expand back into more of a global sort of conversation as opposed to a more narrow Latin conversation. Was that your experience?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think NatP did that quite effectively. There was definitely a Latin American presence at NatP this year. But now this is NatP Global. This is meant to be more of a global conversation. And I do think that that was very much reflected in the people who were attending. In the interest of full transparency, I wind up going to a lot of these markets with a back-to-back schedule of meeting clients. So I don't often get a chance to watch the keynote speeches or go to the panels as much as I would like to. I think they're made available afterward, and I'm looking
Mm.
forward to really taking some time and getting to watch them. So, this is going off of just the people that I'm talking to, and anecdotally what I'm hearing sort of from the my peers and friends who are also there.
And in broad strokes, at least, a lot of humor, but a lot of seriousness that comes with it. It's been a rough time, of course, for the nonfiction part of our industry, as we've talked about in prior conversations on documentary businesses webinars. 25, was a little bit rough for people. I'm sorry, 24 was a little bit rough for people. Have already got the brain on the wrong year. I feel like 25 is a little bit, there's a little bit more optimistic sort of optimism being mixed in. And I did sense that, I think, in some of the recaps and conversations that I've had regarding both Real Screen and NatP, that there was a little bit more of I can see some paths forward for how we can get some green lights and get back in the swing of things.
Yeah, I think 2024 to me represented a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace. There was so much change that was happening so quickly in terms of, the business, the directions that networks were going, the vast technology and platforms that are now available to producers. It felt very confusing and scary all through 2024. My takeaway from 2025, and at least the beginning of it, and from NatP, is that it seems like that uncertainty isn't as deep anymore. It's now everybody is sort of understanding the marketplace. They're understanding the tools that they have, and now it's about figuring out how to make that marketplace work for you as a producer. So it's a little bit less of a business model of let's develop a show, pitch it to 10 networks and hope for the best. This is more, I think, of a focused strategy. So how do you take who you are as a production company, who you are as a network, who you are as a rights owner, and make this new environment work for you so you can monetize it. And that, I think, hopefully will continue through the rest of 2025 as we become more accustomed to digital distribution, VOD distribution, AI tools. I mean, AI was a huge part of this conversation as well during NatP. So how do we make that work for us as content creators?
How is we haven't really talked about the AI element, but it's almost obligatory to have an AI panel now on every market agenda. I will tell you from my own experience at a couple of recent events where I participated in AI conversations in both instances, and very quickly I have to admit that AI is moving so fast that you can go to a panel session even as recent as 3 or 4 weeks ago in Miami. And if you went to another panel conversation on it, say in MIP London, in a week or two, it would have to be rewritten, by at least 50% because it's just moving so quickly. what was the conversation, either formally or informally, on the floor there for you at NATPE as AI becomes more really an accepted part of our protocols?
Well, as an international distributor, AI is becoming very relevant in terms of dubbing.
Mm.
AI dubbing has become, a huge part of the marketplace. There are multiple companies that are competing for work in that AI dubbing space, and all claim to have the ability to dub very quickly into pretty much any language you could you could possibly imagine. And as a distributor and rights owner, that becomes very attractive, but it also comes with a lot of question marks. How good is the technology? Will that technology be accepted by networks that we're dealing with? What does that process look like? So that's been a big part of the conversation, and that's really picked up, I would say, in the last year. It's
Yeah.
been quite interesting, and a lot of it too is sort of an ethical conversation, which we don't even have time for to get into on this webinar. But is it the right thing to do, or is it the wrong thing to do? There's a lot of just question marks around it, and I think that it's an area of the industry that will continue to develop, and we'll see what happens. The other part of the conversation is utilizing AI in production. So there are several companies out there that offer opportunities for producers to input like a prompt, and it will generate what looks like an amazing recreation. I've seen sample interviews done, things that if you were flipping through your television, you might not even realize is AI anymore. The technology has gotten so good, and you can generate anything that you can imagine, and you're able to change anything at a moment's notice. So there's a production conversation, there is a dubbing conversation. I imagine there's probably by next year, there'll be 10 more AI conversations to add to the list. It really is sort of now about us figuring out as producers, how do we utilize that technology in an effective way, in something that helps, us monetize or be able to produce efficiently, while still, supporting the human beings that we like working with.
Yeah, I think that's I've run into some of the similar conversations, both in one-on-one and Science Congress towards the end of the year last year had a fantastic panel talking about a lot of the subjects that you just discussed on AI and the use of it. I think it's particularly important in the nonfiction side, and there's a different sort of thought process within the nonfiction side of the ledger versus the scripted, where there's an expectation of real versus not real. But like you said, probably a discussion for another day. The other aspect of AI that I don't know that you ran into though, but there's a good number of distributors now and rights holders are licensing their catalogs to companies to use for AI learning, to teach the AI, in a sense, getting credit for probably what has already been happening behind the scenes. And they're reaping some pretty sizable license fees from that. And that's becoming kind of its own really significant business out there. I've talked to a couple of contacts in the industry that have done deals along that line for their libraries. And it is something that I think each rights holder distributor is going to be faced with as we go forward. But in terms of your own takeaways themselves, right? As we talked about some of the broader subjects, I know there were a couple of things that you wanted to sort of really share with the documentary business audience here that you picked up on in a couple of quick sort of lightning round things, if you will. Maybe what's your top 2, 3 sort of things that you want to highlight on your PowerPoint if we ever forced you to make one?
Sure. I mean, I think everything sort of relates to my top takeaway, which is now that the uncertainty is sort of diminished, it's how do you make this business model work for you as a producer, and how do you look at your own slate, your own content, your own expertise, and really utilize that to be able to create and monetize content. Monetizing content becomes a big part of the conversation because there are now so many platforms on which to distribute your content, but you do have to make a living from it. And I think, being able to examine, what those distribution outlets look like, what those models look like is very important. Um, I think that
I'm sure
IP.
YouTube must have been a word that got mentioned every now and then in that.
Huge, huge, absolutely. Yeah, YouTube is a major part of the conversation now. And this is where, that uncertainty, maybe it still lingers. We all know YouTube, we all understand it. But what does it offer to producers, and how do you maximize what you have as a producer? It's one thing if you're going to YouTube with, a franchise show that has 500 episodes versus a concept for a show that you're looking to pitch. How do you take those two different things and figure out your path forward? Those paths look very, very different. um the other aspect that has really been a big part of the conversation is branded content, and we're seeing branded content in new ways, really very integrated into the creative conversation at this point. Dan, I think you and I were just talking about the Chili's Lifetime
Yes.
collaboration movie about National Margarita Day. But there's some amazing talent in that. I mean, it's a brilliant marketing plan, but obviously there was a creative force and producers behind that. Those branded opportunities are becoming more and more relevant with, especially with companies that allow for easy and wide distribution, either in the United States or throughout the world. You have Vizio, you have Roku, you have Amazon, you have all of these platforms that are looking for content. You have brands who are trying to reach audiences, and you have brands that want to be seen in a very meaningful way. So it is a good collaboration. And if you have those brand relationships, that becomes exceptionally important. The other thing too is I would encourage all producers to look at their own IP and their own expertise. What do they bring to the table? What's that element that is proprietary to them that nobody else has? Maybe it's an expertise in a certain area. Maybe it is certain IP. Maybe it's an older show that can be revamped in some way. I mean, that's one other takeaway, is that a lot of what is old is new again. The shows that are breaking through on Fast, on YouTube, often they're quite old. And maybe there's a revival to talk about. So I think there's so many new ways of monetizing content, that you have to figure out what makes sense for you. And going to a market like NatPe and Realscreen, it is an expense, it is time out of your schedule, it is time away from your office, but these are the opportunities where you kind of see where you can grow in the future. So I think, it's not easy, always to attend a market, but something like this that combines a lot of different elements all in one week, especially at the beginning of a year, I think is always a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's well said. One final question for you before we're running a little bit short on time here, but a lot of what we've seen in person at the conferences, the follow-ups, our own sort of more direct experiences in casual and not so casual conversations. There's a real opportunity that's starting to rise back up again here in 25. But I do feel like a lot of this is still concentrated on companies that have resources and a larger footprint, enough staffing to have maybe somebody devoted to development or marketing, or being able to sort of, cash flow their development while they're working on a production over here in the hopes that they get another production over here. And that's fantastic. But what about the guy who, he's a one man or a one woman show? It's like, one person with a coordinator. They don't have all of those same resources. Are the opportunities there for them as well?
I think that they are. What I would encourage those producers to do is really figure out what's your goal for being at that market. Is there what do you have something specific? Are you selling a certain project? Are you looking to absorb general industry knowledge? What are you trying to accomplish? And then have a really long look at who's attending the market, what panels are available to you, and really go into it in a very strategic way. I think that's the best way to do a market is really understanding what are you there to accomplish, and then building out a schedule and a plan that makes sense. I think that the markets are important, especially if you are, independent. This is the time for partnerships, and that's another big takeaway that we
Yeah.
can get into at a later date. But partnerships are really important on so many levels. And this is where you're going to make those relationships.
Yeah, I think partnerships, without a doubt, are becoming sort of it's obligatory to have a co-production panel next to the AI panel in every market now. Um, so well said. Well, Liz, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and your insights on your time in Miami. Is really, really helpful to this audience here. We will definitely get you back here for a conversation sometime in the future. But for now, I want to thank Peter Hamilton once again for allowing me to step into his chair and have this great conversation with Liz. I also want to thank our producer, Caitlin Cooper, behind the scenes, doing some great work that you never get to see on the screen here. So with that, we'll bid everybody a great day, and maybe we'll get to have another conversation like this regarding MIP London. So have fun, everybody.